one of the great concerns you had was, I'm so afraid the spirit of the church will change when we get in the facility. But I want to also ask you, does it have to stay the same? In other words, could the spirit even be better?
Hey, Castleview, thank you so much for joining us today for our Castleview Baptist podcast. And today we've got a really special guest. And I was looking around yesterday at church, and there's a lot of people in our church that actually wouldn't have even met our next guest yet. And though you don't know him, we know him well. As a matter of fact, Pastor Jim Schettler has been my pastor, my wife's pastor, and when I went off to college, Pensacola Christian College years ago, in 1991, he was our pastor and really influenced us and has become just a very dear friend of ours. And Pastor, it's good to have you today. Really excited to have you on the podcast. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, I've been really excited. We've watched from a distance a few of the podcasts and very excited to be here today.
Yeah, you've done more than watch from a distance too. Over the years, you have really been an amazing help to us. I mean, you are our biggest cheerleader. I mean, if I need anything, you know, you're the guy that I call. And I've always appreciated that even through this whole process, you've been somebody that I've been able to get some advice from. I would love to know this as we kind of get started. What did you think? You were at church yesterday. I think we had some people at our church that were probably there that know you going, hey, how come Pastor's not preaching today? You know, Pastor Schettler's here. You know, he usually preaches when he's here. I asked you to do that, and you just wanted to sit yesterday and just kind of take it in. So tell me about your experience.
Yeah, really. As we came in and watched everyone coming in, the excitement of the church, the spirit that we sensed, both Marilee and I thought to myself, I think this is what Tate has always envisioned. That doesn't mean that the journey wasn't important. It doesn't mean that there weren't great mountaintops in the entire journey, but it doesn't mean that you've arrived either. The journey's the long ways to go.
Far from. Yes, sir.
But I will tell you, there was just a great anticipation of what was going to happen today at church from the people. And, you know, I travel everywhere and I sense that in some other churches. So it's not like it's only a Castleview, but there seemed to be this anticipation. We are so excited about being here. God's going to speak to us today. There's our friends. Here's who we fellowship with. And here's the God. We're going to sing to this God that we love. Yeah. And I thought, Pastor, that this is a season in your life and definitely in the ministry and definitely in Castleview that's a very special time. And I thoroughly enjoyed it. And I mean this too, Pastor. You spoke yesterday about marriage. You spoke about that marriage is a gift from God. It's a covenant and it's a partnership. And I mean this. Every one of those points spoke to my spirit and my soul yesterday. Everything you just said. It was just like, man, oh, I needed that. And, you know, I do go and preach everywhere. So it was so nice to be preached to. And you know what? I mean, it really meant a lot to me. And I really mean it, honestly. It wasn't you. It was the word, but the way you delivered the word. And I do have to tell you, your visuals, the screens, the multi-image, just everything really touched my heart.
Well, good.
And I thought, Lord, I think this is what we prayed for.
Yeah, it
17 years ago.
You know, it's interesting. We're at a stage in our church. You know, you just mentioned it. There's been some highs and there's been some lows, right? I mean, when you're involved in ministry, it's up and down. And I remember calling you probably 2 years in. We were in a good season. Things were going well, and I gave you a good report. And I said, boy, this is going and this is going. But I remember saying, Pastor, I feel like we are hanging on by a thread, though. You know what I mean? It was those early. It takes so long to establish. And so there were, I would say 16, 17 years that were really the sowing and the planting and the watering and the cultivating. And I feel like we're beginning this harvest season, where you're seeing leaders stand up and people take ownership, and not just the pastor or not just the staff or not just a person or two. I mean, you've got a group of people that are being raised up that are really doing the work of the ministry.
Pastor, something I struggle with, but I know there's a truth to this. And I know the church is not four walls, and we know it's not a building. But you have to say, being in a building has made a difference. And I'm not trying to spring something on you right now, but let me ask you, why do you think four walls on a piece of property makes a difference? Is it because it's a tool that I don't know? I'm very interested, because you would say there is a difference now that you are in a building, and yet I know every fiber of your being that a building is not what the church is.
Right. The building's a tool.
How do you
Well, the building's been a game changer. And let's, not everyone here would know this that's listening to this right now. I know for years, you and Drew have talked about, hey, we got to get in a building. We got to get in a building. And I don't think there's anybody in the world that wanted us to get into a building more than me. But Castle Rock's so unique, right? I mean, there's, if you were here and you kind of start looking around, the challenge we always had was, number one, buildings are incredibly expensive. Number two, there's almost never parking we just don't have a lot of buildings that have parking. And once they would come available, somebody would gobble it up, and it was a really high price, and our church could never handle that. And so I really always did think there probably was going to be a transitional building for us. I think the reason it made such a difference, first of all, at the school, nobody really knew where we were. You're in the back of a subdivision in a neighborhood, and it was really like pulling teeth to get people out there. The other side of that, too, is I think that so many churches come in. The very first person we ever talked to here in Castle Rock that called us, they got our information, they said, hey, we've been part of 8 or 9 churches. They come, they go, and yours probably going to be the next one that just kind of comes in and goes. And I thought, well, thank you.
How encouraging that is. Man.
And let me tell you what I told her. I said, thank you for reminding me that it's going to have to be God that does this. I need to remember that God's going to have to do it. And when we moved over to the Sutton facility, here's the conversation, right? I want everyone to hear this. Okay, so I'm up in Denver. This is 2020. We're just coming out of COVID at this point. And we had a transitional building. The school had closed down. And all of these churches, you remember this? All of these churches are coming back together again. And if you think it was hard not to meet when we were all doing Zoom or all doing online services, well, when all the other churches start coming back again and you're still online, Pastor, I'm telling you, that's depressing. I mean, you're going, you're starting to have people go to other churches because their kids need some things to do and all of that. But the school shut down. We got no place. So I'm making a visit up in Denver. On the way back, I'm kind of discouraged, and I called you. And you remember this conversation?
I do.
Okay, so I call and I say, Pastor, oh, this is the worst. I mean, we've got nothing. And you said in that conversation, you said, hey, doesn't any member of your church have like a barn or something? Do they have like a barn to meet in? And I remember laughing, and I'm like, Pastor, this is Castle Rock. I mean, nobody's going to meet in a barn, kind of thing. And you're like, well, I mean, you think somebody would have
something. Is there anyone in your flock that has something?
Something, right. So we get off the phone, and it was like the Holy Spirit just said, Nancy Sutton had mentioned to me a few months before, they had a building with their business. And she says, hey, we've got this tenant. We've got about 4,500 square feet. We have a tenant in it that may be leaving. Okay, so I think, well, let me give her a call. And I called Ron that night, right after we got off the phone. And I said, hey, Ron, I said, Nancy had mentioned something. Are they going to be leaving? He said they moved out a couple of weeks ago. I said, can I come see it tomorrow? And Ron said, sure. So 10 o'clock the next day, I go visit Ron. 10 minutes in, I'm going, okay, this'll work. What do we do to make this happen?
Yeah.
So I know you were big on that for a long time.
Yeah. Well, it just changes the dynamic so much. But you know what? You didn't really answer my question, though.
No. So I was going to get to that now. Okay. So here's what I think. You asked about what kind of a difference the building made. Why did it make a difference? Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. You and I talked about this. Drew and I talked about this. And I think that it was two things. Okay. Obviously, first of all, the Spirit of God, the Word of God, there's a difference, right? I mean, when you go and you preach the Word, God's going to do what He's going to do with the Word. But there was a palpable difference with the way I felt the Word was received when we went into the building. And here's what I would say. I would almost say it like it almost gave us a credibility in a way
That's very good.
that we did not have before. I think when people came to the school, they certainly wondered what's going on here. Are they going to make it?
Yeah.
I think even in a transitional building, people think that. When we walked in for that first service, it felt like people guests walked in and said, you know what? They were a little bit more receptive to the message. That there was a permanence. There was a I think a feeling of, hey, this church has made it or is gonna make it. You know, it's not so transient as a school situation, and I think it gave it a little bit. Authority may be the wrong word. I think credibility in people's minds as they walked in.
Boy, Pastor, that's really good. I'm just reading right now in my devotion, 2 Chronicles. And when Solomon dedicates the temple, there's a difference. Now, and Solomon is so protective of our God does not live in this temple. He says our God is way beyond this temple.
Yeah.
But for the name of God, we build this temple. And you know what that temple brought in the world? Credibility to Israel's God. They looked at Israel different after Solomon builds that temple. And Solomon, in his dedication prayer, is very clear that, hey, our God isn't confined to this little gold temple. Our God is everywhere. However, now that they had this temple, the way that the world looked at Israel was different. That I love that.
We've seen that over the last 2 weeks. We've had about 30 people join the church. About 2 months ago, we had 25 join the church.
Yeah.
And half of them, I think, this is a very practical thing, but I think half of them said, we just drove by the building. I mean, we were just driving by, we saw it, and thought, hey, there's a place. And I think, and by the way, this is the first time that we've got multiple guests every single Sunday. Yeah. And I think just having a presence there from a very natural, pragmatic viewpoint, people drive by, they see it. Maybe don't go right away, but when they're going through something, when they need something, they know where to go.
A couple things that come to mind I want to ask you. You're going to reiterate what I'm about to say, but explain it a little bit more. The building becomes a tool. And I think that is a really good word to explain a building used for the Lord. How has that building become a tool for ministry?
Oh, it's a great question. Well, it's given us spaces, first of all, to be able to minister. And I'm big with our church. We talk to the church a lot about we want to steward people well. Right? So we've got these opportunities. Easter Sunday, we've got 700 people there. We're averaging 400 on a normal Sunday now. So we've been growing. And so you've got these people that are coming together because the building, in a lot of cases, we drove by, we saw it. That's the tool of letting them see it. They've come in.
And Pastor, the way it stands out, what's the name of the road?
Crowfoot Valley Road.
Crowfoot Valley Road. When you're like quite a ways away, ooh, what's that building out there? It almost looks like an ark, which is kind of cool too.
It is kind of crazy. When we first got it, I kind of thought, Lord, is this crazy? We're in the middle of nowhere.
No,
You know,
but
and
you're not.
all of a sudden, even before we didn't even know it, but all of a sudden these housing developments start going next to us.
Yeah.
And did you notice how close we are to Parker? We are the very last Castle Rock address.
Wow.
Everything to the east of us is Parker.
Oh, that's really interesting. What a perfect location.
It sits on that hill. So last night we had the kids, and Debbie and I are teaching the 3 and 4 class, you know, and so we've got these little kids on Sunday night, and our lesson was God created everything, right? So we played I Spy in the room, you know, and we looked out the window. I spy clouds. Who made those clouds? You know, God did. You know, and we went outside. We took a little nature trail hike yesterday.
Yeah.
We saw the flowers, you know. Hey, what color's that flower? It's orange. Who made that flower? God did. We had a double rainbow last night. Did you guys see the rainbow out there? Who made that rainbow? God did. And then we're kind of finishing up, and we've got this huge herd of elk that just come behind us, you know, and the kids are mesmerized. We're looking at these elk. Hey, who made those elk? God did. And so I know that parents last night heard, hey, guess who made, this? God did.
I'm so afraid to say what I'm about to say, but I go to a lot of churches that you could never do that. You'd have to take a security guard to go down the street with them. And praise God for those churches.
Sure, that's right. That's right.
You know what? It's also then utilizing the tool properly that you have.
You know, it's interesting too. The last thing we're standing out on we're kind of by the crosses where the crosses are set up.
Yeah.
And we're looking back at the building, and I show the kids. I say, hey, there's something really big over there. What is that? And one of them says, oh, that rock, or one of them that no, it's bigger than that. Keep looking, and finally one goes, the church. And I said, that's right. I said, who made that church? Oh, and they said, God did, and I said, oh, God, you got to know that God did this.
That's rich, man. That is really good. Yeah. So it is like, it's a tool, it's a facility that can be used, and it's been different.
That's right.
Hey, one of the things, and I thought about this, and when we knew that we were going to do this podcast, I thought about this statement. One of the great concerns you had was, I'm so afraid the spirit of the church will change when we get in the facility. Well, I've thought about that. Tell us a little bit about what you thought the spirit of the church was in Soaring Hawk and in the transitional building, and what you think the spirit is now. But I want to also ask you, does it have to stay the same? In other words, could the spirit even be better in the days ahead? I know you've been we got to make sure that now we're in this building, that we protect the spirit we've always had. Well, could it be God has even a greater spirit?
Sure. So, I think there was 2 things that went along with that. First of all, I was very intentional with the church. I don't want the DNA of our church to change. We are built on the authority of the word. And there was a little bit of, I think, I don't know if wrestling is the right word, but on my own spirit, I didn't want to get to a place that we walk into a new facility and the pressure of the finances begins to dictate the preaching. Or how I relate to the people.
Yeah, that's
good. And so we actually, one of the proactive things that we did to make sure that we weren't pulling punches. I got this donor sitting right here. Don't be controversial. Or I got this donor over here that might be a little different. So we better stay away from that biblical issue. One of the things that we did right away is we started a trending series again. And so once a month we talk about a topic that is going on in our world. And we found those trending series to be so helpful. People are so desperate to know. I think most believers would go, whether it's LGBTQ, whether it's the 1312 bill that was being passed here, whether it's pro-life, creation, evolution, whatever that is. I think Christians, generally would say, oh, yeah, I'm against that thing, and I don't like that thing. But I don't think there's a ton of people that go, I know why I'm against that thing. And so let me find out from the Bible what that, and actually that's helped me because there's so many people in our church, they love it because, and I've heard over and over again, Pastor, we love that we're coming to a church that gives us the truth. And so that was my first concern, that I don't want the DNA of thus saith the Lord goes away. I want to make sure that we're not pandering to any people because we really feel like we need it. You know what I mean?
Well, you did that yesterday. Let me just say.
Sure.
You
sure.
didn't pander to anybody. Yes. Maybe a little bit to the wives, but
well, I'm married, so that's a little bit safer. By the way, we were talking about this. I gave that illustration at the airport. And you admitted it may not just be me.
I think our time is up now. Isn't it? I think the podcast.
So if anybody's listening right now that wasn't at church yesterday, I gave that illustration about husbands leaving their wives behind. And sometimes at the airport, I just feel like Debbie, I am a fast walker. And by the way, I do want to get to my next gate, and I feel like it's very important to get there. And she's always just going, but honey, I need you to walk with me. And I even shared that there's been a couple times, and she's going to listen to this. There's been a couple times that she stopped, and I will look back, and I realize she's not here, and she's 100 yards back, and she's just looking at me like, are you going to walk with me? Are you going to keep on going? And listen, I was not alone in that yesterday, was I? More men.
Yeah, you were not alone. You were not alone.
You and I and Drew had a pretty funny conversation about that this morning.
We can continue moving on now.
See, these are the kind of DNA things I needed to include in our church, and you're afraid to talk about it. That you may not have done well with this situation.
Well, I'm not going to donate anything more to the church.
So the other thing was, the Spirit. I was a little bit afraid that. Have you ever been to a church that is kind of bursting at the seams in that building?
Yeah.
And so there's an electricity in that church, right? I mean, it's like, hey, we really seat 300 in this space, but we've got 350 here, or if you got 250 and 300, it just feels like, whoa. I mean,
no question.
Energy. And this is great. Well, now we're going from a space over the Sutton's facility that we had one 4,000 square foot room, and the nursery is in office space. The literally they're in cubicles.
Yeah.
We had one children's class in a hallway. We had one class in the lobby. I mean, all these. You're having to do all of these little makeshift things. You're packed into a space, and then you go to a bigger space, and you kind of lose that intimacy, that energy, that closeness.
But you haven't yet. And there's even, and I tell you, the word I said's a good one. There is such an anticipation, which has always been true at your church. But I think the anticipation now is, what's God going to say to me today? What God's going to speak. And I think that's really good.
Yeah,
and
I do too.
And I do. I almost sense, and I've been coming to your church periodically at different times over the last 17 years. There's the friendliness, the joyfulness is as good yesterday as I can remember 17 years ago.
And let me tell you the key to that. The key to that whole thing is we have so many not consumers anymore. Yeah. We have so many contributors. We have owners that are walking in right now saying, listen, this is my church. This is my responsibility. Yesterday morning, we had, we're calling them kind of dream team meetings, 8:30. It's people that are there for greeting and parking and hosting and ushering. And we'll kind of come together. Not everyone makes that. It's kind of a newer thing. But we probably had 25 in that volunteer room yesterday. And I didn't run it. Bill Beckfeld gets up and he matter of fact, he gave this great challenge yesterday. He preached before I preached yesterday. Amen. And I told the whole group when we're done, I was ready to run through a brick wall. I was like, this is the coolest thing to have people that are Jeremy with the guest services. They own it, that they're standing there leading leaders. I go to it just to support it and be there, but I'm not running it. It doesn't, and that's been a transition our church has made. It's not pastor central
Okay.
as far as I got to have my hand in everything. There's a lot of things. I walked into a life group meeting last night that Pastor Johnny's got with all of our life group teachers.
Yeah.
Well, he had already gotten that thing started.
Yeah.
He was getting information. I come in halfway through. I sit down. I hear a couple things. I give a little input. I leave. I got to go teach this class. And there's owners in our church
Yeah,
now.
Pastor, this is such a critical conversation right now. Hopefully they've been watching the podcast to this point, because I'm telling you, Pastor, your future depends on the things that you've been saying. You've got this baby that, okay, there's no question it was God, but you've had this baby that you've birthed, and it went through its childhood. It's 17 years old. It's about to leave home now. To think this out. The key to good parenting is the release of the child.
That's really good, yeah.
And Pastor, I think God will always have you as the one with the vision of the direction, but allowing those that God has brought into your church to begin to own and begin to lead. And I'm telling you, cutting some of those apron strings and still trusting God. God has still played. You are the under shepherd. Pastor, he's the feeder. A bishop, he's the overseer. Elder, he's the kind of the vision. That is you. But allowing people to take and when they own it, giving them the responsibility and the authority. And that, I would think, will be one of your biggest challenges.
Okay. It has been. I feel like we're making that transition and doing a much better job with that now. But I will tell you that it's hard for somebody that you've got high expectations and the way you want to see it. Yeah. And then you're also used to it. And here's what the biggest challenge I think for me was. Yeah. My love language is words of affirmation, right? Sure. So I kind of like, somebody tells me something good, my tail's wagging, I loved in those early days. Pastor, you're so organized. Pastor, you did this so well behind the scenes. Boy, you're at the hospital with us. Good. And I've talked to my staff a couple of weeks ago. We sat down, and I've talked to my leadership. I talked to the deacons just Tuesday night. We had training. And I said there was a season that I could be the central figure. There was a season that I could make every hospital visit. And I kind of prided myself on that. Sure. That, hey, I'm the one that's going to go to the hospital. And I liked all of that. And as the church has grown, what I realized was I'm going to be the lid, right? The church is not going to grow beyond what I can facilitate and the needs that I can meet. Wow. If that's it, if I'm the guy if I've got to micromanage every area, if I've got to have my fingers in every area, if I've got to get the credit for everything going on in this church, we're going to really, we're going to have about 200 people and that'll be all that I can do.
That'll so good that you know that. Because there's a limit to what you can pass.
There's a limit. And to be really honest, I had to do a little soul searching at some point. And a lot of that came down to pride. Yeah. Okay, why do I have to be the one doing that? Why can't? Because Ephesians 4 talks about, the pastor should be equipping the saints for
do the work of the ministry.
That's right.
Go, bud.
And so now we're in this different phase where it's okay. You talk about the parenting. This made me think of it. You talk about the parenting and releasing these. Yeah. I get more satisfaction now from watching these people. We have, I don't think you did. They were in the first service yesterday. Phil and Rhea are brand new believers. They trusted Christ in my office after the Easter service last year. Yeah. Well, now they're there in the morning. They're serving coffee. Wow. They're helping greet. Amen. They're filling needs. Yeah. We've got dozens of people like that are doing that. Well, I see these kind of people, and that's what I take more satisfaction in. Look what they're doing. They're using the gifts that God has given them to be able to serve in the church, and that's what the church is.
Well, Pastor, maybe this is a good way to close this. Is now we've come full circle. Yeah, and I hope I say this in the right spirit as well. But, you asked me twice if you wanted to speak to yesterday. And I said, no, man, I really don't. I really want to see. And I was convicted by the message, the whole things I've said. But what was the greatest joy that I had yesterday was to walk away and go like, man, Lord, did I have a little fingerprint in Pastor Tate's life? Did I? And I think it is now even greater than preaching is seeing someone that maybe you mentored a little bit and to see them doing what they're doing right now. Yeah. I mean, I got to tell you, Tate, it was just a joy to see how God's using you right now in my life. And I think as you go in ministry, and you just hit on it, I think some of the great joys now that you're going to have as pastor at Castleview is seeing your children that you've invested and mentored into owning it, taking it, running with it, and doing those things. So that may be a good place.
You didn't have a small fingerprint on it. Your fingers were all over it, and obviously all glory goes to God, and you're big with that. I mean, and. Not to flatter you in any way, because I don't think that encourages anybody.
We don't want to end with this.
No. But let me tell you something. I will tell you, you and Marilee have been the people that, and I appreciate that I've been able to call you over the years. And here's one thing I appreciate, and I think this is good for everybody. I've asked you some pretty tough questions. It's been a roller coaster. You said once, wow, Tate, I don't know if I've ever known a pastor that's had more highs and more lows than you have. And it has been. But one thing I appreciate, Pastor, is there's been so many times I've called and said, hey, I don't know what to do with this situation. And you said, you know what? I don't either. Let me think of it. Let me pray on this. But you always do. You always call me back. You always talk to me. You always let me know what your input is. And you're honest with me. And we appreciate how you and Mrs. Schettler have been such a big part and such good friends of ours over the years as well. I was glad you were there yesterday. It was fun to have you. It's a little bit intimidating to have your pastor there a little bit when you go in. But I really enjoyed, our church did as well. So thank you for being willing to invest in what's been going on here at Castleview. And church, listen, you're going to get a chance to be able to know Pastor a little bit more over the years. I don't know if everyone knows this, but Drew Schettler, who is over our live stream and media and all of that, this is his dad. And he gets a lot of his creativity from Dad. He probably gets more creativity from his mom, his mother. I know a lot of people wouldn't know her yet, but incredibly gifted. And I do want to close with this. I'd like to say this to our church. Thank you for owning your areas. Thank you for finding the places in the ways that God has gifted you, and just saying, you know what, God's gifted me with children. I'm going to go serving children. God's given me the hospitality. Let me go do that. And if you're listening right now, and if you're not yet plugged in, you're part of our church, but you're not plugged in. I'm telling you, you will love your church more if you get serving and owning what God wants you to do in this place. Hey, thank you for watching today, and we look forward to seeing you again next week.